Welcome to episode 64 of the Yes You Coaching podcast. I'm your host and confidence coach, Anna Manning. And today we have got a slightly different episode for you because it's an interview with my life coach, Jess Leroux. We've been working together for a little while, and I thought it would be nice to bring her on, and she actually coaches me a little bit actually on something that comes up for me. So you can hear that process too. But before we get into the episode and before we get into the interview, I have a free masterclass coming up in October, on October the 19th, and it's called Speak Up. And it's for anybody who has ever had a thought in their head at work and then for whatever reason not been able to get it out of their mouth, not been able to say what they wanted to say at work. And in that class, I'm going to help you to work out exactly what's going on in your own mind, which is making it harder for you to speak up. And then we're going to think about the tools and techniques and the strategies that you need to use in order to make it a little bit easier. And I can speak to this with some authority because I've been coaching on it for 5 years. So I've got a lot of stuff that I think can help you. So go to the show notes. There is a link in there for you to sign up. If you can't join us live, don't worry, because if you sign up, you'll get the replay delivered to your inbox. All right, without further ado, let's get on with the episode. Welcome to the podcast, Jess.
Hi, Anna. So nice to be here.
Oh, good. So I have already explained to the podcast listeners that today we're kind of turning the tables because Jess is my life coach. Jess is my coach. And so we're going to chat about the things that we've worked on together and the kind of changes that I've been making, because I'm always grilling other people about how they've done that and how I've worked with them. And I thought maybe it would be interesting to share a bit about the fact that I do that in my life as well and what that's meant for me, and no better person to come on and talk about it than my life coach. So yeah, welcome, Jess. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So as you said, I'm a life coach. I've been working with you, Anna, now for about a year, maybe even, well, I mean, you took a little pause in between, right? But so essentially almost a year, pretty much. And yeah, I like to help people live their lives in full color. So, if people might not quite feel fulfilled in whatever area of their lives, or something's missing, or they don't dare to step outside the box in a way, I could support them, and I help them kind of get the courage to do that. And the results are amazing. And Anna is a brilliant case in point of doing this work. Anna, do you remember why you started or you wanted to work with me in the beginning?
Yeah, I do. So I'd like been through some massive life changes, and I realized, I don't even remember when or why, but I realized that my outfits were just looking like very drab. And I was thinking, when did I get so drab? And it was like everything was beige, even though beige doesn't even suit me, because I was like, I've got beige hair and beige skin. My clothes were like beige or grey, which actually I'm wearing grey today, but never mind. And I was like, when did I get like so like, yeah, when did I get like that? And I thought, I think I need some help to like where is that more colorful, like sparkly person inside me? She's definitely in there somewhere. I was like, I think I need some help. And I think that's why I arrived at your door.
Yeah. So we worked first a month together, right? And the focus there was on your wardrobe.
Yeah.
And I remember you were going all in on it, right? Like really buying pieces, and not even only buying, but finding things in your closet that gave you a lot of joy, but that you just didn't wear so much.
Do you know, I've now completely forgotten about that. I've got this like amazing little holographic clutch bag and it like
Yeah.
shines all the colors of the rainbow, and it's like got gold on it. And it's the kind of thing that as a kid I would definitely have picked out, and my mum would have probably been like, oh my God, it's so tacky. But actually I loved it, and I still love it now. And I bought that bag like 2 years before, because I'd
Mm.
obviously just seen it and loved it, and I hadn't even like worn it or taken it out of the house. So I think that starting point was for me like, okay, I'm gonna wear all the things now that I've got in my wardrobe that I just wasn't wearing because I'd gotten too beige.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the journey together continued after that.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a bit more of the different things we managed to accomplish that were on this. We sort of made like a list together, right? About
Yeah.
the different areas that you wanted to tackle or
Yeah.
improve.
Yeah. And I think when I realized that I was like beiging my wardrobe, and I use
Hmm.
that term, I mean like dampening down my kind of um shininess or like sparkliness, or you know whatever, like those kinds of things. When I realized that's what I was doing, after I'd finished thinking about it in terms of the wardrobe, I was like, I think I'm doing this in other areas of life as well.
Mm.
And as you were like, well, is there anything else you'd be doing? Is there any other things that you'd be looking at if you weren't kind of doing this like beiging thing, which is still kind of a theme now, because it turns out every rock I look under is like, oh, beige. Like, oh my God. Yeah. And there was a few different things. And one of them was that I was like, well, I would get a tattoo.
Yeah.
And I've wanted a tattoo for years, and I knew exactly what I wanted. And I just hadn't got it because I just thought, oh, I'm just not one of those kinds of people, I won't
Mm.
like it in the future. And like, it's not very sensible.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, when we compiled that list, like I'll chat about the other things on the list, but you were like, oh, so what are you going to do first? And I was just like, oh, I'm going to have the tattoo. And even I was thinking, what? I was like, am I? And then I did. And I remember sending you a picture from when my arm was like covered
Yes.
up after I'd had my tattoo. I was like in my bathroom. And I thought, oh yeah, I've just done it. Cool. The
Yeah,
unbeiging begins.
that was so exciting for me too, right? Because a lot of the time we have these ideas and things we'd like to do, right?
Yeah.
And then like you said, you don't go through with it, or you don't actually like think you're ever going to do it. And
Mm.
then when you picked the first thing on the list that was like getting a tattoo, that's it could be considered a big deal, and it also can be like no big deal because it's quite a common thing, but it was
Yeah.
just so fun. And that, like, sure, it probably gave you quite a boost of energy, or to want to keep doing this work, the keep like unbeiging, quote unquote, that we sort of coined that term, or you did, Anna, throughout
Yeah.
our work together, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because what I realized after I had the tattoo, and I had the most hilarious conversation with my dad, and I can say this because he's never going to listen to this podcast. And he said he said, why didn't you ask me before you had the tattoo? And I was like, because I'm like 38 years old, or like 39 years old, or whatever it was at the time. I was like, of course I'm not going to ask you whether or not I'm going to have a tattoo. And he said, of all of my children, you would be the one that I would think would have had tattoos. And I thought, well, I'm bloody glad that I did then. Because
Yeah.
even you, Dad, know who I am. Even you, who doesn't want me to have a tattoo, knows that I'm a person that would do that, except I wasn't doing that
Yeah.
because the Beijing was like, no, be sensible.
Oh, I just got shivers.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, I will never forget that moment. It was such a powerful moment. And I think it's just sort of like, Anna, you everything we've gone through together has been so powerful in itself. And
Mm.
it's been such a beautiful transformation to watch. And like, I'm so honored to have been part of this work that you're doing. And if If you need to know anything about Anna, it's like when she puts her mind to something, she goes for it. And like no excuses. It's just gonna happen. And it's so exciting to work with someone like that, right? Because that's really where the results happen when you really, like you, because everything we've worked on, it's been for you.
Yeah.
And then the impact that that has had on your business and what you're doing in your business as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how that trickles over into helping your clients
Mm,
and your people.
mm,
It's
yeah.
just incredible.
Yeah. And thank you, Jess. But that, to me, that speaks to the power of having, well, for me, that's why I love to have a coach, because that you you can have all these like little ideas in your own head, and you can kind of think these things sort of in private, and you can kind of keep it under wraps, like, oh, do I really want this thing, or maybe I would go after that if I dared, or whatever. But it's like once you've had a place where you can come and you can say it out loud, it's like it's out of your mouth then. Like
Mm,
someone in the world, now it's completely confidential as a space, but someone else in the world knows. And it's so helpful because it's like, okay, if I can tell it to this one person, maybe I can do it. And I'm a bit like that. Once I can say it and get it out of my mouth, maybe something will like stay in my head for 2 years. But once I can say it, I can be like, okay, I'm doing it. But actually, that
yeah.
leads me to think about one area where I'm still thinking about is I think that I'm still beiging
Mm,
in the area of and I can't remember whether I mentioned this before, but I keep thinking about, because I think I'm still beiging in the area of talking about um, some of the stuff that I care about when it comes to my business. So I care about women at work, about women's empowerment in the workplace, and I read all the research that comes out. Like I know the stats, I know the difficulties, and those difficulties, yeah, they're changing, but they haven't gone away. And I sometimes shy away from talking about that stuff. I know the problems are there, and other people know the problems are there, and people come to me because they want to feel more confident at work. But I think if I was completely like being just myself and being on beige, I would be probably doing a little bit more like aggro shouting about what some of those issues are and the fact that they exist.
mm, yeah. So tell me why you think you don't feel comfortable, or why aren't you doing that right now?
I think like part of it is I'm I've been used to being in like a kind of corporate world, right? Where things are sort of things have like a quite a nice glossy veneer on them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's to this or to that. Everybody's meant to be very measured and very controlled. And you kind of keep a lid on expressing certain things because that's, the way it's done. And a lot of the talking to people that I do often is on somewhere like LinkedIn, where again, it's like this professional network, and that, we're all meant to be very professional about things. And I also think that in the past, I may have been told like, oh, don't kind of go on about things like that because it's boring.
Mm.
And I guess at some point I probably like internalized that, and I don't know, it must just like live somewhere in the back of my mind. But it seems to like censor me slightly.
Yeah. But could it be true as well in some cases, in some ways, that it could be boring
I
to some
suppose,
people, right?
well, do you know what? It absolutely, I never thought of it like that. It absolutely will be very boring to the people that do not want to hear it,
Yeah.
and to the people who are like very invested in keeping things the way they are. Like to a workplace that doesn't want to talk about the fact that their gender pay gap is big and getting bigger. I'm sure that people banging on about their gender pay gap is terribly boring and inconvenient and not a topic that they want to discuss at all. And you know what? There's other people that are going to think, oh, yawn, that's so boring. No one cares about women's empowerment. Like, what the hell? We're all equal now. Yeah, there are people
Yeah.
who would find that really boring.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely not one of them.
Yeah, and that's okay, right?
Yeah,
Because I mean, the way I think of it is like, if there's people that are going to be bored by that, there's going to be other people that aren't, right?
absolutely.
It's not like everybody is in the same boat. Um, so in a sense, that's even more reason in a way to do it,
Mm,
right?
that's true. And you know who probably, and now like thinking about it, so when people come to me and we're working on confidence stuff together, some stuff is like a kind of unsaid, and then occasionally they'll say something like, oh, I'm the only woman in that meeting and I get asked to make the tea, or I'm the only executive and somebody thinks that I'm going to take a note, but people still get this stuff all the time in the workplace. But if
Mm,
if if nobody talks about it, it's almost like invalidating their experience, that actually, well, no one's talking about it, so you know what, everything's fine now, so you really shouldn't be worrying about this stuff anymore.
yeah. And if you
And
don't talk about it, it's not going to change either, right?
exactly, I mean, it may even get
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah.
And I have to help people to think about, okay, is this just an issue that maybe you're experiencing, or do you think there might be some like wider a wider kind of societal context that you're coming up against this?
Yeah.
And often there is, and the wider societal context is the kind of stuff that we're talking about.
Absolutely.
The pay, the bias,
Yeah.
and direct and indirect discrimination, all of it's still happening.
Really, it's the people who think it's boring and inconvenient that need to hear it the most as well, right?
That's a good point. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that is a
So
good.
even you just shouting it out or being there, it's like you might throw out a fact or something that you've heard, right?
Mm,
And someone it's enough that someone just reads the headline or and it's like, "Oh," and
mm.
scrolls past it, but it can spark ideas as well, even
Yeah,
for someone who thinks it's boring or inconvenient.
yeah, that's true. And I guess it also keeps things alive, and it keeps things on the agenda if people actually talk about it and people know that other people care about it.
Yeah,
That is part of how change happens. It's a massive part of how change happens.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess something that, because I work with a lot of individuals and I work with people on a one-to-one basis, but some of the issues that they're facing are common issues. And like, I used to work in policy and strategy, right, in my old life, and we would say, okay, well, there's this individual that's had this problem, and then there's this individual that's had this problem, there's this individual that's had this problem. And because we know all of that, what's our responsibility to then take that information, like in a very anonymized way, and actually do something with it at like a national level or an international level or whatever, like policy change, or advocacy or campaigning, or something that's like adding the voices from these one-to-ones over here to this being part of this bigger issue. So actually I
Yeah,
could see it as just, it's just a plain responsibility that the things that I hear and the stuff that I know gets translated into, or like part of the business or part of it is to pull from that and actually, do something with it,
yeah,
which is a completely different way of looking at it.
absolutely. And I mean, you work with companies and corporations, right? So
Yeah.
they're looking for that change as well, right? And
Yeah.
if you don't talk about it, how are they going to know to hire you to do it, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I didn't know that was going to turn into an impromptu coaching session, but that was actually really useful. That was actually really useful. Yeah. You see, this is how the Beijing gets you. This is how the Beijing gets me. It like
Yeah.
flips in the side of my mind and is like, you shouldn't talk about that because people don't want to hear about it. It's very boring.
Hmm.
And it like obscures all those other things that I just talked about, which are also very important, which are very important.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mm.
absolutely. Anyone who ever did any sort of meaningful work in the world, no matter how big or small, are definitely people who have had to be willing to be, looked at or judged in a, oh, that person's so annoying or boring or,
Mm.
like inconvenient, because it's inconvenient because it sort of rocks the boat, right? But most of the time, the people who think it's inconvenient know there's truth to it.
Yeah.
And that's why it's inconvenient, right?
Yeah. And actually thinking about one of the things that I help people do all the time is to speak up.
Yeah.
And I know that it's hard for people to do that. And so, we work to get them to a place where they feel more comfortable speaking up. But I think we always have to acknowledge, even in that work, and people do get more comfortable like sharing their ideas and even challenging people, they get more comfortable doing that. But what I
Yeah.
say to people is there is always going to be a time where you cannot expect it to be easy, and you're going to have to decide whether or not you want to do it anyway. Like there could be comeback from it if you
Yeah.
stick up for someone or if you raise an issue. It's possible. And at that point,
Absolutely.
it's up to you to decide, like, is it worth it? And sometimes you may say yes, and sometimes you may say no.
Hmm.
But thinking about that, like, it's not much of or it doesn't feel like much of massive risk to me.
Hmm.
I think my like brain would have me think, oh, the Beijing would kind of have me think, oh, you need to stay very neutral and like not have any opinions about certain issues. But actually, that's definitely not who I am
Hmm.
or really how I want to be. And
Yeah.
I am a loudmouth, and I always have been. And I used to not like myself for that, because I was always told, oh, too much, too loud, like whatever. And now I'm like, actually no, that is me, that's what I'm like, that's who I am. And
Yeah.
unless that bit of me is allowed to live, then someone's missing out on something. There's some loud thing that I'm supposed to be shouting about, and if I'm not doing it, then who's going to do it? Like,
That's
I'm the
one.
go
I
on.
think that's a perfect example of looking at criticism we've gotten about ourselves and finding the strength in it, because you being too loud is actually a superpower for you, right? Like helping, using your voice for the things that you care about, that matter to you, is one of your greatest strengths,
Mm.
when you can turn that sort of criticism around.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's a big part of you, right? Like, we shouldn't be shutting down or beiging, quote unquote, the parts of us that are big and loud and take up space, right? Especially as women, taking up space can feel extremely uncomfortable and dangerous
Mm-hmm.
and unsafe in many, many ways. But sometimes, a lot of the time, I think we crave to take up more space in whatever kind of way it might show up for you.
Yeah. And actually thinking about it, like so much of the stuff that people, come to me with, it might even be when people come for, I'm a leader and I need to be more confident. It's like, okay, well, what do you need to be like? And they're like, I need to be like this big, like loud, extroverted, like brash type of person, blah, blah, blah. And it isn't them. It's
Mm,
never gonna be them. And I'm always helping people to think, okay, well, confidence doesn't have to look like that. It can be very quiet, it can be very unassuming, it can be like introverted, whatever,
yeah.
and it can still be there. But
Hmm.
it's thinking, instead of not thinking like I should be like something else, it's like, well, I am like this.
Yeah,
So how is that my gift, or how is that my superpower?
exactly.
And I help people to do that all the time. And now, good that somebody else can help me to do it too.
Mm. We all need it.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. We do. One of the other things that I was thinking about was the I had this like idea or dream that when I worked for myself, I would be able, because I work mainly on my laptop, I do some stuff in person, like training and that kind of thing. But a lot of the time I'm working remotely. And I had this idea, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I could like go somewhere and like work on my own and just see like a different city or a different place, and I'd still be working, but then I would go out and like do my own thing. And now thinking back on it, I was like, I was so nervous about it, I wasn't even doing it. Do you
Mm,
remember that?
I do. I remember it like being sort of one of the big reasons, like as well for like perk, so to speak,
Mm,
for working for yourself, right?
mm,
And working remotely is that you do have freedom to work from anywhere.
mm.
Yeah, I remember that that was definitely something you wanted to implement, but
Yeah.
hadn't yet.
No, and I wasn't. It was like, again, it was like one of these things that I just keep inside and just like mull over all the time
But
rather
also
than,
it was the money thing too, right?
oh
You're
yes, that
not
was it.
you're not, should I be spending this money on myself, you know?
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
remember. Yeah, I was like, it's very frivolous
Yeah.
because it's not necessary, right? Like I have a place where I live and I can work from there. So it's not necessary for me to go and work from like, well, I've worked from Italy and Spain now. It's not necessary for me to go work
Yeah.
from those different places.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember the first one I did. I was going on a hen do in Rome. And I thought, well, it'll be easier to just kind of tack on a week of working from abroad because I'm already there, right? I've already paid for my flight. There's me again thinking I'm too frivolous. I've, I've already paid like my Ryanair flight, like 30 quid or whatever it was. And then I could go and like, I rented this Airbnb apartment in this amazing place. It was like a train ride outside Rome. And it was in this apartment, and this woman lived in the apartment upstairs, this like cool old hippie woman. And it was, the view over this lake was just absolutely something else, and I had a little balcony where I could sit with my tea and look over this lake. And I did all my coaching calls, but I swear most of the time I was like going out for these lunches and eating loads of pasta and going out for dinner every night on my own and just having a great time. Went kayaking in the lake.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant. And you know, it was also a little bit hard. But I remember thinking, I've definitely done the right thing when I was on the Hindu. And the woman whose Hindu it was, her mum was there. And she said, oh, are you going home tomorrow? I was like, no, I'm staying for another week and I'm going to be working from here, you know, not working from home. I'm going to be working from Rome. And she kind of looked at me like gone out and said, oh, what does your partner think about that? First question she asked me. And I was
Oh.
like, OMG. I was like, I have no idea what he thinks. I mean, I do know what he thought. He was like, yeah, good for you. Go for it. Like, have a great time. But I just thought, ooh, like there's the conditioning in the background, which is that like what's the conditioning that I shouldn't do anything on my own, that a woman doesn't go and do stuff like that on her own. And of course, women do all the time. But people are like, oh, that's a big thing. Or, and it's not really going to some European country for a week. It's not exactly like, you know, it's not exactly dangerous or anything. But still, there were these ideas around it, which people like reflected back to me, which made me really glad that I did it.
Mm, yeah. And your partner was totally okay with it.
Of course. And even if
Yeah.
he hadn't have been, I would have done it anyway,
Yeah.
obviously.
Why is that?
I'm not going to sing Destiny's Child. I really feel like I should, but I'm not going to. Just because I'm the owner of my life, and I get to decide what I do. And yes, maybe like generations ago, and actually, even when I think to like back to my grandmothers, they would not have been able to do that.
Mm,
And I often reflect on that. Like my grandmothers were not able to do exactly what they wanted, like I am. They weren't able to just buy their own apartment and live on their own in London. neither of I mean, I don't know if either of them want to get divorced. Maybe they didn't. But, I was able to do that. I'm able to set up a business doing something that I want to do. I'm able to travel abroad. Like, that's those things are an incredible privilege.
Mm.
And it's amazing to be in a position in a time where somebody gets to do that. Not anybody, not even just a woman, anybody gets to do it. But I went to this thing recently. It was a talk about the plight of women in Afghanistan. And obviously their rights have been eroded and stripped back under Taliban rule now. They're not allowed to go to school. They have to be completely covered again. There's going to be a restriction on they're not allowed to go out of the house without a male chaperone. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And I came back from that talk that night, and I was going through London, and I was getting on the train. I was coming back to my apartment, and I was thinking about what I was going to be doing my business the next day. And I was just like, those women cannot do any of that now.
Mm.
And it isn't like that here, right? It isn't, we don't have the same restrictions that some women in the world do, or even the same restrictions that our grandmothers, great grandmothers, great great grandmothers had. We don't have that. But some of the restrictions still exist inside our heads.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I guess part of the work that I do with people is getting them to see what restrictions, some of the restrictions are on the outside, and you have to help people to manage that, but some of them just are on the inside. Like, should I do this? Could I do this? Does this look bad? What will people think? Like, all of those things.
Yeah.
I always think it's funny when people are like, we need to smash the patriarchy. And it's like, where do you think you're going to find it? Going to smash your own head in?
Mm.
It like lives in everyone's heads. And then it's created in other things like policies that don't benefit women, or, laws that don't benefit women, or norms within organizations. But all of that like comes from, or most of it comes from, just unconscious conditioning that is in our heads.
Yeah. Everything that's ever been created comes from a person's head, their thoughts, ideas, both the good and the bad.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the massive benefits of like having been like focusing on this Beijing, or this unbeijing, for me has been like seeing all the different parts of my life where I'm Beijing,
Yeah.
and deciding, like consciously deciding, oh, okay, I'm doing that. Do I want to carry on doing it?
Yeah.
Another one was that I wanted to do my bathroom. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was another area where was Beijing. I was like,
And
my
it's
bath,
done now.
it's done. It's only just been done though. And that was like a year ago. I wrote that down.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no, the bathroom's fine. Like, it doesn't need doing. And that was me like Beijing. I was like, no, everything's fine. Like, doesn't need doing. It's very frivolous. There's that thing again. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And yeah. And now the bathroom's done, and it's
Now taking a shit is even more pleasant.
really Absolutely. Can't have a bath at the moment. It's too hot, but I will be enjoying that too at some point.
That's the wonderful thing about this work as well, is that you can literally find the beige in the smallest of things too, right? Like when I think of the work that I do, it's like everything in your life matters, from the spoon and fork you eat with, right? To the wardrobe, to how what products you use to wash your hair or everything like that. And it might seem superficial and materialistic, but when they all add up, when all these little moments and things add up, it creates a much more enjoyable experience. And then I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, that sort of it it expands, it flows out into all areas of life. And
Yeah.
that's why, like, all the work we've done together, it's really, we've covered all the bases, it feels like,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, because you might think, oh, for me, like the unbeijing, I might think that it's just about like going abroad to work or or like wearing something in my wardrobe that I hadn't worn. But actually, you're right, it is way more than that. And when
Yeah.
you said like, oh, it's about the knife or the fork that you use, that's actually another funny one that I'd completely forgotten about. Like you introduced me to this idea that things are like that your experience of life and the things that you use are actually that, you know, that can be important and that is important.
Yeah.
I am from Sheffield, so for anyone who doesn't know, stainless steel was invented in Sheffield, and the history or part of the history of Sheffield is that they produced the best cutlery in the world and like precision instruments, scissors, that kind of thing. And it was known the world over. And if you have like fancy cutlery now, even can be anywhere in the world, if you look at it, it might say Sheffield on it. And
Mm.
when we were talking about this idea, I was looking in my drawer where I keep like my spoons and my forks and stuff. And I pulled one out and I was like, why am I using this piece of shit fork from like, I'm not going to offend your countrymen, but from IKEA? Jess actually lives in Sweden. No, I don't even know
Okay.
if it was from IKEA. I shouldn't say that. I love IKEA. But I was like, why am I using this fork? It's like bent at the top and I have all this mismatch of stuff. And I was like, it's not even good quality, whatever I was using. I don't think it was from IKEA. Sorry about that. And I was like, I'm from Sheffield. Like, I should be taking this seriously. Like, I should have proper Sheffield cutlery. This is like an advert. A Sheffield woman, you shouldn't be having some crap knife that can't even cut things. So I went vintage shopping with my dad, which is never something that I thought I would do in a million years. He was like, oh, you can get all the cutlery in the antique shops in Sheffield. So it was brilliant. We went on a Saturday morning and we went around all of these antique shops and we got me cutlery that was from all Sheffield made cutlery. And two of the products that we got, I think the forks and the spoons, were from the factory that my granddad had worked in.
Oh,
I know. And now because I have those, every time I pick up one of those knives to use or those forks or whatever, it is actually pleasing to me.
yes.
Right. And before I never would have even noticed that. I never had this concept that Jess showed me, which is things, you know, that you use all the time, they do actually have an impact on you.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's why I wish uh toothpaste makers could update their their packaging and stuff. And that sort of thing, because I get pleasure of, like, out of every single part, like the glass that I drink my water out of. Sometimes I take a wine glass instead of a regular glass, and it just up levels the whole experience. And you can really do that with everything.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
true. And actually, you know, it's kind of obvious in a way that when you go like when you go to a nice restaurant or you go and, you know, you go and do something quote unquote special, you like make an effort with your clothes maybe and you expect things to be really nice and you expect them to have gorgeous cutlery and a really nice wine glass that's pleasing to hold and drink out of and it really is all part of the experience. I'm like,
Absolutely.
well, why am I using piece of shit cutlery in my own house?
Yeah. But even then, right? Because some people, when they hear that, they might think, oh, but I don't want to have to put all that effort in all of the time, right? But I think of it as, even, I love wearing like sweatpants and a sweatshirt, but why not make it like really awesome, cool sweatpants and a sweatshirt, like, and a sweat set kind of thing, and like you can be super comfortable and like get joy from the way it looks too.
Yeah,
You know, it
absolutely.
doesn't have to be full face of makeup and all dolled up and done up just to get this experience out of life. It's like you can literally do it with everything, with your comfortable, like, slippers that you wear at home, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, your pajamas, everything.
Mm. Yeah, like I've got my tie-dye socks on today that I love. I usually
Yeah.
steal socks off my boyfriend But then I was like, I got these really cool like tie-dye socks, and they're like white and green. And I also have another pair of socks, which I call my disco socks, which my brother and his wife bought me for my birthday. And whenever I'm wearing either of those pairs of socks, I'm like, it's going to be a good day today because I've got these socks on. I'm like, why don't I
Yeah,
just wear cool socks every day? I'm
exactly.
wearing these shit socks I've stolen from my boyfriend.
I've
Apart
got
from the
some
Grinch ones, which I love.
sparkly snake socks on right now.
Awesome. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Is there anything else that we should talk about?
What would you say is um, doing this work? And if you can think of the person you were when you first came to me versus who you are now, here, today, in this
Mm.
moment, what would you say has been the biggest impact on you or the biggest difference that you see in yourself?
I think that I am more myself. Like the person hasn't changed. Like I am myself, but now other people can see that more too.
Mm,
And I used to be more guarded, I would say,
mm,
like with sharing things, with any kind of vulnerability, with telling people about maybe stuff that was happening in my life or something that I was struggling with or a challenge that I was having or whatever. I had this kind of harder exterior, like this harder shell. And I might have still struggled with all those things on the inside, but I really wasn't going to talk about them or not really, or share them on the outside. And now I feel like I'm softer on the outside and stronger on the inside.
mm.
Whereas before, I was stronger on the outside and softer on the inside.
Yeah.
So it's like it's flipped around.
So how has it made you stronger on the inside
Well,
and softer on the outside?
yeah, I always had this fear that the kind of Beijing, right, that existed to protect me. Like, don't do this, don't try this, don't say this, don't be honest about that. Like, keep it all under wraps. And that's going to be the thing that's, but actually, all that did was keep it all inside. And I
Mm,
do think that weakened me overall because I wasn't allowed to share it. I wasn't allowed to talk about it. I just had to kind of, it was more lonely, that kind of not being able to be real about things or less
yeah.
real. And so I think that weakened me overall. And then my fear
Mm,
was that if I did this unbeiging and I was just more myself and I was more out with it and I shared all these different things, I thought that would make me weaker or like look weaker. And actually, what it did was it strengthened me. And I guess I had, to, in order to do that, I had to say, I am actually okay who I am and how I am. I am okay. Maybe not even okay. Maybe I am great the way I am. And I don't say that in a kind of like, oh, I think like I'm the best thing ever. I definitely don't. But I'm like okay with the stuff that also is like quote unquote not okay.
yeah.
And that's made me softer on the outside and stronger on the inside.
Mm. It sounds like your insides are showing.
Yes.
You know, like it sounds like when people meet you and experience you, they get all of you,
Yeah, they do more now. They do more
right?
now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
And
remember
it's,
a very close friend said that she said, I watched you change. And this was years ago.
mhm,
I watched you like harden up. And she said, I couldn't even put words to it at the time. But she said, it was the same time when you became a lawyer. And she said, I just always assumed, oh, maybe that's what happens. You know, if someone's like coming into this world and they're becoming very serious because they're a lawyer or whatever. She was like, I always just kind of assumed that maybe that's what it was. And she says, looking at back on it now, I don't really think that that's what it was. And now she's like, now I see the you that I saw before again.
mm, lovely.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Anna.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And thank you for your help in welcoming me back. It's been a journey, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's been such a great pleasure, Anna. It really, truly has. You are an incredible woman, and it always pains me when incredible women do not pat themselves on the back, right? Do not sort of embrace their greatness and how incredible they are. And you have been doing that work, and it shows, and it's beautiful.
And thank you. And how interesting, right? That is the exact work that I do with other people.
Yeah.
I'm like, but she doesn't see how amazing she is, and it's so obvious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Of course you do this work because you're in it. You're doing
Yeah.
it yourself too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your clients they're learning from the best. They're getting
Yeah,
guidance and support from the best, right? Because you're in there in the trenches with them.
absolutely. I do stuff all the time that I think I really haven't got the confidence to do this. I'm doing it anyway.
Yeah. Yep. And you've proved that to me over and over again.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Jess. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm going to leave Jess's details, Jess's life coach extraordinaire. And I'm going to leave all Jess's details in the show notes so that if you think, oh, maybe I could do with a pure life coach, uh, maybe Jess is your woman.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Jess.
Thank you.